Hi, everyone. Welcome to the few subscribers who have joined since the last time I posted a live video. My name is Cheryl. I use they, them pronouns, but I'm not aggressive about enforcing that because I understand, recognize, and believe that people from all different walks of life have different ways of understanding the way that linguistics work. I've been classically trained in teaching English as a second language, and other things and recognize that not every internal logic system even thinks in pronouns. So I've decided to just not get offended by people I don't care to be in constant, ongoing, close, reciprocal relationship with when they get my pronouns wrong. I've also completely turned the thing on its head where I don't go into women's spaces with the word women in the title and demand that they are inclusive verbally by deleting the word women because I recognize that women's rights are under attack right now. They are. And you've barely had women's spaces. Women have barely been allowed TM in the world that's run by mostly white rich men, to have credit cards, to have bank accounts, to have businesses, to make legal decisions and choices for themselves. This is something that's been new between my grandmother and my lifetime. So, of course, I'm going to let women have women's spaces. And if I feel safe going into a space and they feel safe having me there, it doesn't have to be a problem. Okay. So I digress. But that just gives you a little insight into me and how I take up space in the world and how you don't have to be afraid to offend me or make mistakes because I believe we're all human beings. And when we consider the well being of the person in front of us, and we just believe they are who they say they are, and we use the language they use to describe themselves, that is the bare minimum of respect. I'm not going to call you a name that's not your name, and I respect you for that. And I would please ask that you respect me that too. And that is something that we can just do. We don't have to understand why someone thinks, behaves, and moves and breathes in the way that they do in the world. All we need to do is believe them and respect them. The end. You don't want to use certain language in your home life? Don't. That doesn't give you the right to tell other people what they can and cannot be called and how they should and should not be addressed, right? I hate it when someone calls me ma'am or miss. I hated it before I even knew that being non binary was an option. Things that used to be considered honorifics when my mother was a child feel patronizing to me as a nearly 40-year-old person. Like, I don't like, never have liked being called ladies or girlies or sisters or whatever. And part of that is like my own relationship with sisterhood, my own relationship with forced familial stuff, and it's nuanced, right? So there's people who will not respond to that language, and there's people who will respond to that language. And our job is to make it as easy and equitable as possible for people to feel fully seen, fully supported, and empowered to be like, this room is for me or it's not for me without feeling like their humanity is in question. Does this make sense? So, one of the ways that I use Substack is ways to exercise sharing my story, sharing my truth, sharing my thoughts, my feelings, my observations in the world as I am also learning and growing and changing as a human on planet Earth in a way that isn't a product that I sell. Yes, I do have memberships, and I got my first paid subscription this month, and that felt so good. But that is mostly as an exchange, an appreciation, a support of the work that I'm doing because I spent the last 15 years just marketing, whether I was marketing in my sales job with Shaw Cable before they were bought by Rogers, whether I was marketing in nonprofits and doing fundraising and newsletters and all of that kind of stuff, whether I was helping to write shows or working with clients on the back end with all the stuff that I do in Cosmic Concierge. If you want to know about that, find me on Instagram at the Cheryl Folland, exact same as it is on this account. And um, I kind of lost my ability to go in deep, to connect to those sensory details. And I sat down to write my book, The Things I Got from My Mother, and I got about 35,000 words in and realized it was just a detailed outline. Like it's just a detailed summary. And because I had been locked into social media and short form storytelling, I had lost some of that muscle memory of going deeper. So I thought, what a wonderful gift and experiment to come on to Substack and do that here without the pressure of having to SEO optimize every single blog post I make and make sure it tags back to my brand, so that I can nurture my audience and get a sale, so to speak. Like I get to come on in written form or in video form or in audio form and share authentically from my heart, my soul, and my mind what I've moved through, what I'm moving through, what I'm curious about, and give people a little more depth into who I am as a person. Because the snapshots that you get on social media are not wrong, but they're momentary. They're when I'm my most polished, most excited, most activated, most in my zone, and they lack the nuance and the depth of the wisdom that I carry from the generations before me, from the heap loads of life that I've lived, and from what I'm going through now. So, I'm Cheryl. Welcome to this space. I would love to know more about you. There is a chat that's been activated for subscribers. Whether you're paid or free, you can get access to that chat. I would love to hear about you, things you would love to hear me talk about. If you know me outside of this space, you might already have some things bubbling up for you. But let me share with you a little bit of where I was just before I moved to Vancouver Island, where I live now. So in 2011, oh my God, let's keep that in there. That's hilarious. In 2011, it was the year I graduated from Peace River Bible Institute with a bachelor's degree in biblical studies. I was training to be a missionary with Avant Ministries, and I flew down to Kansas City, Missouri from Canada. Point of interest, even back then, I got detained on my way down. So what we're seeing now isn't new, it's just more obvious and in our faces. That happened to me back then. I digress. Carry on. I went down to missionary training and I was there for about 90 days. I was supposed to be there for 6 months and I failed out hard. I failed out hard because at the time I didn't know, but all of the different ways that I was masking and surviving as an undiscovered autistic person, a queer person in a conservative religion where you would go to hell and burn forever if you were queer, and all of these ways that I compartmentalized different parts of me and boxed it up, they all came to a head and I flamed out of missionary training really hard and I got sent back to Canada. And I completely had a mental breakdown, completely broke down, lost my sense of identity, lost my ability to care for myself because I had put everything and all that I am into this incorrect belief and belief and understanding that the only way for me to help people with the scope of understanding of the world that I had at the time was to be a single missionary forever because I could never be married. I wasn't allowed to be in love with my same gender or people who looked like me. And basically, everything about me on the inside was wrong and bad. And I was trying to make up for it through religious service. And so when I couldn't, I thought that's it. There's nothing for in me for life. Like I'm gonna suffer my whole life on earth because I already had. I've had a very traumatic upbringing in early adulthood. And then I'm just gonna like burn in hell forever for things I can't change. This feels like hopeless. And I stayed with a family for a little while while they kind of boosted my confidence, brought my normalcy back into my life, showed me that I didn't have to earn basic love and respect, those kinds of things. And I got reconnected with some of my community. And over a glass of wine one night outside at the fire, I was like, hey, if you ever move to Vancouver Island, can I come? Like, would that be okay? And I was like mostly kidding, but hoping it would be true. And they were like, yeah, actually, we are. And I was like, when? And they were like, in 2 weeks. And I was like, okay. So, I went back to where I was living and I sold everything I owned and I bought a one-way plane ticket to Vancouver Island and I landed here in 2014. Okay. So you'll see, I flamed out of missionary school. It took me 3 years to get a sense of like functionality back. Like it was probably retroactively, it was autistic burnout and an identity crisis mental health break from what I know now. But in the time, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I sold everything in 2014. I moved down here with 2 suitcases, a backpack, a guitar, and started making my way. It was very bumpy. Okay. And as it often is when you do something risky like that. But I knew in my body, in the place where I always know and follow through, which I now know is my sacral authority as a generator, that I had to go here. So I came here and it was bumpy at the beginning, but I'll never forget sitting down on the beach on Sebastian Beach in Lanceville, BC, which is just barely north of Nanaimo, and feeling like I was finally at home. 6 months later, I met who is now my wife. I applied for student loans, got into university, graduated in 2019 with a bachelor's degree in creative writing and journalism, and then the pandemic hit and all the arts sector closed where I live. And then ChatGPT was invented. And while that was happening, I came across Casey Villard and started working with Kundalini yoga, EFT tapping, theta wave meditation, nervous system regulation, and understanding the interaction between trauma, unfelt emotion, and memory stored in the body and what was going on for me. And through that process of peeling away all of the habits and identities and stored things in my body and processing them, and a little bit of clinical therapy for a while there too, I was able to shed so many layers of conditioning and identity and find that there's more than one way for me to live the purpose that I felt that I had as a child, to make the world a better place, one person at a time, helping people. And I could do that. I could still do that. I could do that from home. I could do that where I am now. I could do that as I am now. And I started to do that in many different ways. And then recently, more recently, 2022, 2023, my wife started showing signs of being sick. And I believe in full autonomy and was supporting her to discover her own path through that. I didn't want to make her do anything, I didn't want to make it worse. And so I gently and consistently pointed her where she needed to go. And we recently, in 2024, she was diagnosed with some autoimmune conditions. I had to pivot from being a coach and session based service provider to someone who could be a full time caregiver and still earn an income, because my wife was the main income earner of our house. She still is, but she was so sick and she couldn't hardly stand some days. She had brain fog. She looked as though she had Parkinson's, but it was completely like thyroid, hormonal, autoimmune stuff. And I went into caregiver mode. I went into, okay, I can't fuck around anymore mode. And I completely pivoted from coaching to back end tech support. And that felt good at the time because I had very clear boundaries. And then something was missing: the spirituality, the channeling, the wisdom, the practical application, the just helping people feel seen, supported, and regulated. I didn't like how transactional and clunky it felt. Like it felt like like I was a vending machine, and the relationship capacity was kind of missing, and the depth. And so I refined, and I spent from like September until probably, if you look at my Instagram account, September until about a couple of weeks ago, it's April 27th at the time of recording, where I just leaned into tech. I just leaned into tech. I leaned into tech. I leaned into copywriting. I leaned into graphics. I leaned into back end structural support. And it was so good. I loved the clients I worked with. I loved the projects I was involved in, but I was feeling dissatisfied. And that's when it hit. I'm still compartmentalizing myself. I'm still hiding bits and pieces of myself. What could my back end support business look like if I didn't hide any of that? So I went full send on Cosmic Concierge, where you get all of me in the scope of back end business support, and being a fractional strategic team member for spiritually conscious entrepreneurs. So that doesn't mean that I only work with people who do spiritual coaching, but that does mean that I work with people who understand how that stuff impacts their day to day and their clients' lives. And it's been so freeing to not have to hide anything. Not that I did before, but I thought I did. I thought people won't take me seriously. Nobody will buy my stuff if I'm a fucking weirdo. Well, I was wrong. So here I am. Had a little nice little ego death and said, watch me. Everybody's going to love me. And the people who don't are repressed. Just kidding. They're just for someone else. It's fine. So if you've been here that long, if you've listened this far, thank you for listening to this part of my story. I would love to hear in the comments or in the DMs what you would love for me to just write from or speak from at the heart and soul level without editing, in a way that would serve you. Like, what do you wish that you had my brain on? As someone who has traveled the world, as someone who grew up super poor with addicted parents, as someone who has gone no contact with an emotionally unhealthy parent, and what it took for me to get to that decision, all of those things. I'm an open book waiting for your requests.